Hey YouTube, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. As always, we thank you guys for being here. I know we say that every week, oh thanks for being here, but we really do appreciate it. We appreciate your guys' views, your likes, but more importantly, we appreciate your comments. So make sure to just get involved, guys. Let us know what you think. Feel free to tell us we're a bunch of idiots if you want. Tell him he's fat. It really doesn't matter.
There we go. There we go.
So we're really excited to bring you guys today sophomore slump or second year success. This video is basically just talking about players who were rookies last year. They're coming into their second season, and really we're just going to discuss, was last year a fluke? Are they going to have a slump, or are they going to break out and succeed? What are we getting from them in that whole range of kind of failure to success? Where are they going to land? We're really excited to talk about that. These young guys are really fun to talk about. Sometimes we talk about the old guys and they get so set in their ways. It's like, well, it's real interesting talking about Tom Brady, who's going to have another great season, but we really have only seen 1 year from these guys, so it's exciting. Things change and a lot happens, especially as for these younger players in the league. Before we get started, though, I'd of course remind you guys to check out our Instagram. That is a place where, like, I think a lot of people underrate it. Like, they'll subscribe, they'll watch the videos, they may even check out the website. But they're not checking out the Instagram, and that's a place you should definitely go. We're posting information there that's not always making it on the videos. We're not making on the videos for weeks. For example, just yesterday we posted some pretty relevant news about Jameis Winston, who's possibly going to be suspended for 3 or 4 games. Or we talked about how Jay Ajayi was just named the workhorse, the full starter there in Philadelphia. So go follow us on Instagram, and you'll get updated with a few posts a day, just 2 or 3, not too many, but with pertinent fantasy information that you're definitely going to want to keep up with.
All right, well, let's get right into it. But before we do that, there are so many players coming out of last year that'd be great to talk about. We actually vacillated, we wrestled with who do we talk about, and so we're actually looking at maybe doing a part 2 to this. But in this video, we kept it to 8 players, 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends. Let's get to the first quarterback we're going to discuss in the sophomore slump or success. Deshaun Watson, will he slump in his second season? Well, I think in order to do that, in order to determine if he is a slump, you have to have a baseline to measure success or failure, a way to measure what a slump would be, right? You have to have something you can base that on. So let's look back at last year, and let's look and see if he was healthy and he finished all 16 games, they were projected out, what would that give him statistically? That, I think, gives us a way to measure whether or not he's going to slump this year, something we can look at. So you take the 7 games that he played, in reality he only actually started 6 games, okay? The 7 games that he played, and you project that out, okay? Those statistics turns out to be he would have finished with 43 touchdown passes, 18 interceptions, 615 rushing yards, and 5 TDs. That's a pretty good year. Forget that for a rookie. That's just an amazing year for a quarterback right there. Let's say that numbers again. His 6 games projected out had he played an entire season turns out to be 43 touchdown passes, okay, 615 rushing yards, and 5 rushing TDs. Those are great numbers. Now, when you consider those numbers, you compare it to Cam Newton when he won his MVP back in 2015, right? That year in his MVP, he got 48 votes, and Tom Brady only got 1 vote, and Carson Palmer only got 1 vote. He ran away with the MVP voting that year, and he should have. He had a great year. He deserved to win MVP that season, okay? Well, Cam's stats that year, he ended up with 35 touchdown passes, 636 rushing yards, and 10 rushing TDs. Those projected stats for Watson are very similar to what Cam Newton did. So if he plays that well again, okay, it's really impossible for him not to win the MVP with those sort of numbers. So then I kind of asked that question, okay, do I see him being an MVP caliber quarterback? Could I see him winning the MVP this year? Obviously, if he does that, that's not a slump, okay? I think that's pretty common sense, right? Here's what I'm going to say, but I would say this. I think the hype surrounding Watson at this point is actually even higher than those projected numbers, and I'll tell you why in a second. I think a lot of people are really kind of focusing in on a 4-game stretch that he had last year, and the reason why they're focusing on a 4-game stretch that he had last year, took a few games for him to learn the offense. He didn't have a lot of first-team reps in the preseason. They gave that to Tom Savage. They were going to bring him, so the coach kept saying they're not going to start him, right? But they quickly realized in game 1 that they needed to look elsewhere. Savage was a mess. And so it took him about 3 games before he really found his groove. And then the last 4 games before he tore his ACL, his quarterback rating was 125, 120, 103, and 107 respectively. And during that same 4-game stretch, he had 16 touchdown passes with 1 rushing touchdown. I mean, those are some great numbers. Look like you're going to say something there.
No, yeah, I was just going to say those numbers are insane. I just imagine, I really like what you just said about the hype. So many people are probably going to be taking him way too early. It's unfortunate. He's so talented that I wish I could be in a league where he'd fall to me, but it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not going to buy in the hype. We'll get that in a second. So you take those numbers during that 4-game stretch, right, and you project that out, okay? It's insane. He would have been on pace to have 64 touchdown passes, 4 rushing TDs, 4,684 passing yards, and 580 rushing yards. Okay, and I think most people are expecting that he's going to have a great second season, that those projected numbers that I previously had mentioned, okay, I think they're expecting that from him. And that makes him a serious MVP candidate. And this is reflected in people's expectations because right now his average draft position, he's the number 2 quarterback taken, only behind Aaron Rodgers. I mean, this guy is being so hyped. People are so excited. They're jumping on that bandwagon. But I'm just going to say this right now. I think this guy is very talented. Those are unrealistic expectations for a second-year quarterback who has looked really good but is hardly proven. He's only started 6 games in the NFL. That's it. And so I think that's putting a lot on just 6-game stretch there. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think he's going to have a good season. I do. I think he's going to have a very good career. But I think he's going to slump a little bit in terms of those projected numbers, simply due to the fact that the bar is set too high for this guy. I feel bad for him. Like, give this guy a break. No matter what he does, inevitably, it's going to be a disappointment for most people. Don't let that hype cause you to overvalue him and take him too early. Here's my prediction. He's not going to end up in the top 5 in quarterback scoring at the end of the year. I know some are going to hate me for saying that. Time will tell. I think what's going to happen is he'll take a slight step backwards because defenses will now have game film, time to prepare and adjust to him a little bit. Now, many people are going to disagree with me on that pick, and that's fine. Back in 2017, that season, we said, watch out for Matt Ryan. We thought he was going to take a step back. Many of you disagreed. We were right. Back in 2016, we said, you know what, 2015 year for Cam Newton was really an aberration. Don't get too excited. We were right, so time will tell on that one. But it really doesn't take a genius to realize that there's just no way he can live up to that hype. I think another reason why we're going to see a drop in production for Watson this year is this. Okay, a lot of his stats were helped by the fact that the Texans' defense was bad, and he had to throw the ball a lot. They were playing from behind. They had a lot of garbage time statistics. Houston's defense last year was worse than the NFL, 32nd in the league, allowing 27.3 points per game. Okay, so their defense is just bad. And I knew they were a bad defense, but I had this other thought in my mind that made me realize just how bad they were. They were worse than the NFL on 27 points allowed per game, and 6 of those games were against Jaguars, Colts, and the Titans offense, and those offenses are not good. And so that just tells you just how bad that defense was. That defense can't get worse. They're going to obviously improve. They're going to make some adjustments. In fact, they brought some guys in this year. They brought in their secondary, they brought in Matthew, Colvin, and Reed to help that secondary. They're also going to have J.J. Watt back, who's healthy. You add him to Marcellus and Clowney on that line. That's going to be huge improvements for that defense. Now, another thing to consider, right now reports are that he's recovering from an ACL surgery, and he's looking great. He's mobile, he's running, he's cutting, he looks really good. But with that said, okay, you still can't forget the fact that he's coming off of ACL surgery. That's going to have some effect on him. Even if it's not major, even if it's minor, it will affect his play to some degree. That you have to consider and look at his numbers this year. Another thing that I consider, if you watch games last year, not looking at stats, if you watch the games, he was fun to watch, okay? But a lot of the big plays that he made last year, okay, they weren't great reads, they weren't audibles or adjustments, but rather his athleticism, buying time, stepping up in the pocket, allowing him and his receivers to get downfield and find open time downfield, right? And so that's why he was did so well last year. It was his athleticism. He was able to get open buy time for his wide receivers. Time and time again, what I have noticed in the last few years, people get enamored with athletic running quarterbacks. They just love it. They come in the league, they get excited. I think about, I don't know why it escapes me now, Robert Griffin III, guys like that, out of Washington. People love them. They were going to be the next best thing. But here's what we have learned time and time again in the NFL. Pocket passers have long-term success. And so he needs to make that adjustment. And I'm not saying he's not there yet, but once again, that takes time. That maturation process takes a while to develop. I think defenses will have game film time to prepare. He's going to see different reads, looks, pressures, and it's going to slow to some degree his effectiveness. So here's where I land with this guy, okay? And you can tell me what you think afterwards. I like this kid a lot. I think he's going to have a great career. I see a year of maybe 25 to 26 touchdown passes, 4,000 passing yards, 500 rushing yards, mixed in with 5 to 6 rushing TDs. A very good season, but not an MVP season. Many people will consider that a slump. So that's my take on this year.
Yeah, I think it's a major concern, his injury last season. For most quarterbacks, if they said, oh, wow, he looks healthy, he looks fine, he's back, and he had a season like he had last year, I wouldn't worry about it. But for a quarterback like Deshaun Watson that leans on his legs he uses that so much. He runs the ball a lot. That opens up the field for his pass a lot more. Every time he rolls out, the defense has to be ready for that. Every time it's a play action or whatever is happening, they got to be ready for him to run it, and that's really going to slow down his ability to run it. In fact, he did a lot on third downs too. I really think that could seriously hurt them in the passing game, that's not going to be quite as much of a threat, because if the Texans were smart, they would seriously limit his running. And so that is my concern. I definitely think he's going to have a drop-off season, although that's not necessarily an insult. His rookie year was unbelievable until he got hurt.
Yeah. It's hard to call this guy a slump because he's going to have a good year, but his rookie season was phenomenal. So let's get to our number 2 guy.
All right, so now I'm going to talk about Mitchell Trubisky. Here's an interesting guy. Had a pretty bad year last year. Picked it up a little bit towards the end, but let's just talk about he seriously struggled. He ranked 28th in quarterback rating, 32nd in touchdowns. He only had 7 passing touchdowns all season. To 7 interceptions, which is pretty bad. 28th in yards and last in yards per game. He only averaged 183 yards a game. That's just awful. If my quarterback barely surpasses 200 yards a game, I'm kind of disappointed. It's really only a good day till he passes 300 yards. That's a very good day for a quarterback. 250 is an okay good day, and then 200 is all right. But he was only averaging 183, which is just terrible. Again, that touchdown interception ratio is brutal. That offensive line struggles, ranked in the bottom third of the NFL as far as pass blocking. Although they do rank in the top third of the NFL as far as run blocking. That's rated by efficiency, by the way, just to note. But that's also a concern. They're not able to protect their quarterback as much. He doesn't have a whole lot of weapons, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about some of the good things that's happening. He only played 12 games last year, which is actually a good thing, because if he finishes 32nd in touchdowns, well, he only played 12 games. Of course, he was bumped down that list quite a bit. I'm sure he would have passed some guys. I think it bodes really well that he started to play better down the stretch. Those last few games he played better, of course, until the very last game he played the Vikings, one of the best defenses in the NFL, and he struggled. But again, he only played 12 games, just getting used to the NFL, and sort of started to pick it up there, which I think is a very good sign. And I like that they brought in some weapons: Taylor Gabriel, Allen Hurns, and Trey Burton. I think Trey Burton could have a good year at tight end. Of course, Allen Hurns could have a very good year.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, Allen Robinson. Thank you. Someone's going to make fun of me in the comments for that. I tend to do that.
We caught it, so we fixed it.
Yeah, we did. And even Taylor Gabriel is another guy who played all right there in Atlanta, but could definitely have a good season here. So here's what I have to say about Mitchell Trubisky. Last year, his year was terrible. There's no way he's going to slump worse than that. In fact, I think he's going to make many improvements. I think he's going to have a much better season. However, I don't think his season's going to be so much better that I would want to come out and call it a success. I would still avoid him as a fantasy option, but he's certainly going to improve off of what he did last year.
Yeah, I would agree with that take. I mean, it's going to be hard for him to slump because he had such a poor year, his rookie season. In that regard, I think we'll see an improvement undoubtedly. I think he's going to make some strides forward. But to move him to that place we call him success, I struggle doing that at this point. I'm kind of somewhere, and I think he'll make some improvements. But he's certainly in fantasy football not a guy that you're going to rely upon, except for maybe an occasional spot start for a bye week or injury in the right matchup play. And even then, that would have to be down a few games into the season until we saw a few things from him. So I agree with your assessment.
All right, well, we can move on to talk about your first running back.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon was a disappointment for many last year as he finished with only 626 rushing yards and a very low yards per carry, 3.5 with only 4 touchdowns. So that was really a disappointment for a lot of people. Now, barring an injury, suspension, or maybe just an untimely death, something insane, it would be almost impossible for him not to improve on those numbers this year, honestly. And so just right there, I'm going to say I think this guy's going to improve on that. I think he'll easily surpass his rookie season's numbers. But I'm going to go one further. I actually see this guy having a breakout year for him at this point. So I'm going to think he's going to be a success. In fact, I'm going to say he's going to be a great success. Now, I want to get into why he struggled a little bit and what was going on there and why I think he's going to be successful. But I'm not the only one I think that feel this way. He had a bad rookie season, but a lot of people are not gun shy. Currently, his average draft position is 17th running back taken, so people are feeling fairly comfortable with this guy also. Now, going into the draft in 2017, a lot of people, a lot of experts, a lot of scouts out there felt like he was as talented, if not the most talented running back in the draft. And the reason why he fell farther down was with domestic violence charges in his past, right? You look at his final season in Oklahoma, he rushed for 1,274 yards and a yards per carry of 6.8, while clipping or logging in what they call an elite target share of 11.7, which is really good. He was touted by many scouts as being the best running back prospects in the class. And so he fell to the second round. The Bengals got him, but he was rated a lot higher. A lot of people felt if you take away the domestic violence charges, he would have been a first-round pick. Now, his yards per carry was low at 3.5 last year, undoubtedly, but he showed signs of improvement. His last 4 games, his yards per carry ballooned up to 5.01. And if you look at Week 11, that's really when he hit his stride. In Week 11, he had his first 100-yard rushing game. That was against Cleveland. Now, I know a lot of people would say, okay, well, it's Cleveland, so I mean, who doesn't have 100 yards against Cleveland? They're a bad team. But if you look at their rush defense, Cleveland's rush defense last year was really good. In fact, they were 7th in the NFL against the rush, so they were solid in that regard. So that 100 yards rushing was pretty good against a good run defense. They only allowed 98 rushing yards per game. Then the next week, he starts really well, looks good. He had 7 carries, 34 yards for yards per carry, 4.9. But he gets a concussion, and he misses the remainder of that game. He doesn't return until Week 16. Comes back in Week 16. He only plays parts of the game, leaves with an ankle injury. But that game, his yards per carry were decent and limited carries. But he finishes the season against a very good Ravens defense who is 6th in total defense in the NFL. He just misses 100 yards rushing. He ends up with 96. So his last 4 games, his yards per carry were 5.01. So he showed some signs down the stretch there that he was improving. Now, were his struggles entirely his fault? Where did that come from? Well, they hired a new offensive coordinator because they really struggled last season. They were 26th in the NFL in total points scored. The first 3 weeks of the season, they had a total of 15 points in 3 weeks total. So they really struggled early on. Now, a lot of the struggles, I would say, was offensive line. Pro Football Focus ranked their offensive line 28th in the NFL last year. They missed Andrew Whitworth and Kevin Zeitler quite a bit on that offensive line. So they went in the offseason, they improved the offensive line, they acquired tackle Cordy Glenn via trade from Buffalo. They brought in Dallas offensive line coach Frank Pollock. And he's going to bring his style of running game and his approach to running game the way they did in Dallas, kind of that smash mouth, just blow them off the line type of run. So they're going to take that approach. Very much we see with Ezekiel. I think that bodes well for Mixon. They're going to try to do the same thing they do in Dallas. They're going to try to duplicate there in Cincinnati. From a volume standpoint, you look at 2017, an outlier for the Bengals. They call it. Look at how many run plays they called. Okay. The team called just 377 run plays last year, which ranked 29th in the league. They were near the very bottom in terms of run plays called. And I think that's important to know that because running games, a lot where it's a volume play, if you look at running backs, often they get stronger as the game goes on. They wear down defenses. The more carries you get your back, especially these big physical backs, they get stronger as the game goes on. Just the fact that they didn't carry the ball and they were near the bottom in carries last year hurts. Now, when you look at some things, you put that all together, once again, I'd stated earlier that they were 32nd offensive in points scored. They're near the bottom. And near the bottom of points scored and 32nd in yards in offense. They were just bad. So when you look at that, but then I have another stat I want to share with you guys real quickly here. Mixon last year had a 1.54. There we go. Allen Robinson. Okay, so made a mistake there. I know I'm going to hear from some of you guys out there. So Mixon had a 1.54 yards created per carry. Okay, so here's what this means basically. There's a metric that they use out there, and it's put out by a company called playerprofiler.com. In that statistic, the yards created per carry, what it measures is how many yards a running back creates after evading his first tackle. And he ranked 13th in the league in doing that. And that's really good, 13th running back in creating yardage. What that tells you, okay, that metric, it tells you how good he is apart from the offensive line. And what you find last year is he did really well in evading tacklers. He was constantly being hit behind the line of scrimmage, which isn't his fault at all. That offensive line was brutal. I think they're going to improve in that area. He's 6'1", 228 pounds. He's big. He's physical. He really has all the skills to be an all-pro in the league. I like this guy. I think he's going to be talented. I think also added value in PPR leagues. Last year had 30 catches. He was pretty effective in the passing game. That bodes pretty well. Another thing that helps, they let go of Jeremy Hill, which really kind of means he has no real competition. I know somebody say, well, what about Giovanni Bernard, whatever. He's going to be used in passing games, third down. He's going to be used as kind of a change of pace back or give him a rest on certain downs there. I think Mixon's going to have a good year. I think he's going to have a successful year. Sorry there. I felt like I was just rumbling through a lot of that stuff. But any thoughts on Mixon?
No, I completely agree with you. One thing like you probably mentioned is just in the draft, he would have been taken earlier had it not been for some off-field issues, which he hasn't really had any off-field issues since, so that's not a concern. But I think he's definitely was a first-round talent that got bumped down for that reason, and I think he could definitely break out this season. He's a guy we both agree on for definitely having a breakout season.
Yeah, in fact, I'll tell you right now, I'm in a keeper league, and I've got a bunch of guys. We only keep 5 guys in this keeper league, and right now it's coming down to Jordan Howard or Joe Mixon for me. I love Jordan Howard, but it's a PPR league, and Jordan Howard's not very good in the passing game, and Joe Mixon a lot more effective in the passing game. And honestly, I'm leaning towards letting go of Jordan Howard, which is going to be a tough pill for me to swallow, but I just get the sense that Joe Mixon's going to have a huge year, especially in PPR leagues. So.
All right, solid pick. All right, so now I'm going to talk about Leonard Fournette, and he's a guy that I'm just going to put out there now. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say minor slump. And that's why, and here's why, excuse me. Last year he went out and got 1,040 yards of rushing. He had 10 touchdowns total, 36 receptions, and 300 yards in just 13 games. That's actually a pretty impressive season. In fact, when you pace that out, had he played a full 16 games, that's 1,280 yards, 12 combined touchdowns, 44 catches, 372 receiving yards. That's a really solid season. In fact, that's a very good rookie season. A lot of people are extremely impressed with him. However, it's a guy that I'm going to stay away from. He's very risky. For starters, the health is a major concern for me. Yeah, he missed 13 games last year. Had he been healthy, he would have had even better stats. But to be honest, nothing says to me, okay, Christian, he's going to play all 16 games this year. He certainly might, but he's struggled with injuries in the past. Another thing that concerns me is the team around him. Blake Bortles is honestly a brutal quarterback. With a career quarterback rating of 44.2, that's awful. And that's who he's going to have as his quarterback all year next year. In fact, I think last year he outplayed what he'll play this year. And I think that, especially in playoffs, I think a lot of people remember Blake Bortles from the Steelers game where he played well this year. And they're all kind of, oh, I think Bortles would be good. But really, he's struggled and he's been so bad. They really should have put some energy, put some time into getting a better quarterback. Not only that, but the quarterback isn't great. The wide receiver situation isn't great. We have a bunch of guys who may be all right, but certainly no big names. Maybe a bunch of guys that are sleepers, certainly just because they're all fighting for the same job. I don't think that any of them are particularly impressive, although I think we talked about Keelan Cole being a guy we think could definitely step out and separate himself from the pack. But even then, if your best wide receiver is Keelan Cole or your best wideout is Marquise Lee, that's a concern. There's also not a very strong presence at tight end there. And so I think that passing game being so bad as it's going to be this year is going to seriously hurt him. We saw, last year Todd Gurley was amazing. What was he the year before? He was bad. And it wasn't Todd Gurley's fault. It was the offense's fault. When the offense can't move the ball, when the passing game is struggling, the offensive line is struggling, so does the running back. And I think that that's going to apply to Leonard Fournette. On the bright side, Leonard Fournette was listed at 228 pounds last season. At the beginning of the season, at the combine, but he weighed in at actually 240 pounds last year. He said recently that he is planning on getting back to his college weight of 223 to 224 pounds before the season starts. So I think that could be good and possibly help him catch more balls, do more in the passing game. But I just have some serious concerns with him, not necessarily because of his talent, but because of the offense that he's in. Don't underestimate what your team around you can do to help you succeed and what they can do to hurt you and stop you from succeeding.
Yeah, so going back to what you said, a slight slump.
A slight slump, yes.
I tend to agree with that. I think he's going to be a very good running back in this league. I think he's a guy that you can trust. He's certainly an RB1, but I do have concerns like you with that offense around him that will affect his play. Obviously, if you're game planning, you're playing him, you're going to try to shut down that running game and make Blake Bortles beat you with the pass. That doesn't bode well.
Exactly. I think the thing to remember is, I think a lot of people, when they come on, they look for fantasy advice. They're like, is he going to break out or is he going to be a bust? But sometimes he's just in the middle, and he's a guy who I think is going to have a slight slump. I think he'll have similar stats to last year. I think he'll break 1,000 yards. I think he'll come shy of 10 touchdowns, however, but I think that'll come in a full 16 games, and if not, I think he could have even a worse year.
Okay, all right. I'm going to talk about Corey Davis, the former first-round, 5th overall pick, finished last year with 34 catches, 375 receiving yards, and 0 touchdowns. I think many people consider that a real bust last year. They're very disappointed in those numbers. Now I'm just going to say this right from the get-go. I'm not a huge fan of Marcus Mariota or that Titans offense. With that said, somebody has to catch the ball and get stats. And I think he's going to easily beat his rookie numbers. I think it's hard not to. He's another one of those that I talked about, just like Joe Mixon, that it's going to be almost next to impossible for him not to go out there and to beat those numbers. Now, there's a reason we talk about this guy. He was a first-round pick for a reason. He's got great size, 6'3". He's got a lot of talent to come out of college. He was a highly touted wide receiver. Now, at this point, he's got no real competition at wide receiver in terms of being the number 1 wideout. He should lead the team in targets if he stays healthy. Now, Rashard Matthews is there, but if you look at Rashard Matthews, he's really a wide receiver 3 at best in fantasy terms, okay? So I think, once again, this team is looking for Corey Davis to step up and be that number 1 guy. They need him to be that guy. He showed some flashes last year that reminded us of how talented he could be. In week 1, he looked really good. Week 1, he comes out, first game as a rookie, 6 catches, 69 yards. Week 2, gets hurt, and he doesn't come back until November 5th. Now, in the playoffs, he showed some other signs too. In his first playoff game against the Patriots, he goes out and he has 8 catches, 63 yards, and 2 TDs. In fact, that's the first touchdowns ever had. Were in the postseason. Looked really good there. So kind of here's where I see this guy this year based on everything out there. I'm not getting into a bunch of stats at this point. I expect a season about 55 to 60 catches, 850 to 900 receiving yards, and 5 TDs. I think that's a safe estimate for this guy. But here's the thing. He's got a high ceiling because he is very talented. And if everything falls into place, he could put up better numbers. Although I'm going to play a little more conservative because of the offense, the team around the quarterback, and some other things. I'm going to put his numbers around that range there. Another thing I think that helps for him and why I think that this is going to be a successful year for him. I'm not going to say it's a great year, but a successful year compared to his rookie season. His coach Vrabel brought in, they filled his coaching staff. When he brought in the other coaches, he brought an offensive coordinator, Matt LaFleur. Okay, so Matt LaFleur was the offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams last year. And if you take a look at what they did with that offense, okay, let's look at the year before. If you look at 2016, right, that year they're last in the NFL. Okay, and total points, they will average 14 points per game. So they come in, new coach, new staff, new offensive coordinator, and last year they go from worst to first in the NFL. They went from 14 points a game to last year they led the NFL 29.9 points per game. I think that bodes really well with new offensive coordinator. I look at all the things out there. I think it's very easily to look at Corey Davis and assume he's going to be a success this year. So, any thoughts?
No, I think that's a solid thing to analysis, excuse me, on Corey Davis. I couldn't have said it much better. I definitely like where you put him around his receptions with about 55 to 60 was exactly the sort of range that I think of when I think of Corey Davis.
All right, let's get on to our next guy.
All right, so now I get to talk about Cooper Kupp. He's a guy I was really excited about last year, actually. I was really big on him. I had him in some leagues. And he actually had a fairly good year. Behind Juju Smith-Schuster, he was the second best fantasy wide receiver or rookie wide receiver last year. He had 62 catches, 869 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That's a fairly good year, especially when you consider all the weapons that were on that team. Todd Gurley went out and had 19 touchdowns last year. And then he has Robert Woods as the #1 wideout, and then Sammy Watkins, of course, was also there. And so I think that's really impressive. Sammy Watkins left this offseason, went to the Chiefs, and I thought that this could certainly be his breakout year. And then they brought, and I thought I was definitely going to go success, but then they brought in Brandon Cooks, and I'm left here thinking, how are we supposed to talk about him? Because we talked about we wanted to do multiple videos, and I know at some point we're going to come to him. I thought maybe I'll push him off and not deal with him now. But I figure I'll get this over with. Let's talk about him. I'm excited, and I'm going to go success. I don't think he's going to explode. His numbers were already good last year, but I think he's going to take off. First of all, I was impressed. He was the 24th best fantasy receiver in standard leagues last year. That's pretty impressive. I think he cracks the top 20 this year, but I don't think he does it by a long shot. This is kind of the opposite of Leonard Fournette. Success, but only a minor success. I think he's limited because of all the weapons that are there, but he is so talented. First of all, at first my thought was that Brandon Cooks was going to have a great year, but then honestly, I think there's a reason that he moved teams, 3 different teams in 3 seasons. I think there's a reason the Saints let him go and he went to the Patriots, and the Patriots had him for a year, and then they let him go and they were fine with it. I think that he's a good #3 wideout, but I think that Cooper Kupp is going to be better. Let's talk about what people have said about him. I think he's going to have a great year, and we'll look at his combine review. What they said about him at the NFL Combine, I don't know if I've ever read a review about a player that's better than this. It says this: elite level of production for any level of football, finished as career 1 division leader in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Hands are natural and strong, catches passes like his idol Larry Fitzgerald, plucks it away from his body and immediately tucks it away, utilizes his route speed variance to create deep ball opportunities. He's extremely confident and competitive. Bodies up corners to win contested catches, believes he can catch every throw and is able to make the circus grab look easy at times. Excellent ball tracker, uses force and leverage at points to break and create room out of his cuts, manipulates coverage with his fakes and stutter steps. I mean, not one bad thing to say about this guy. And you know what? I think that was pretty accurate. He came out last year and played really well. Here's what I'll say. I think he's going to have an increase in his receptions. I bet you he has about 75 catches. And I think he even has an increase in yards. He may in the 900s, maybe 1,000. But I think 5 touchdowns, 5 or 6 is where he's going to be. And here's why. Brandon Cooks is a big play guy. He's the deep route guy. I think he can do that. You've got your kind of possession, red zone threat in Robert Woods. And of course, you've got Todd Gurley. I think he doesn't get a lot of red zone targets, but he's too good. I think he's going to have a step up year this year for sure and continue getting better.
Yeah, I like Cooper Kupp. The moment he arrived at camp last year, the coaches loved this guy from the get-go. He was effective, worked hard. There's nothing not to like about this guy. With that said, I do wonder how much of an impact all those targets are going to be spread out. There's a lot of talent on that team. Brandon Cooks, you talk about Todd Gurley, Robert Wood, you name it. There's a lot of guys there. And so I think he's got all the talent in the world. But I do have some concerns about his ceiling because of that. But I think your assessment's pretty accurate.
All right.
Get to the final player that I'm going to talk about, David Njoku. So we're going to talk about him a little bit. David Njoku has a lot of talent. He's very athletic with a lot of offensive upside. If you watch his first year, he made some real acrobatical catches that really kind of confirm just how athletic he can be and just how talented this guy is. Now, his numbers were hurt. Some would say it's because he was a raw product. He's got a lot of development as a tight end goes, and that's certainly true. But I think ultimately his numbers mostly were hurt by DeShone Kizer's poor performance. I think Tyrod Taylor is a huge upgrade for him at quarterback. He simply is going to have a better year just because of better quarterback play at this point. I'm not a huge Tyrod Taylor fan, I'll be honest, but you look at Tyrod Taylor versus DeShone Kizer, I think Tyrod Taylor any day of the week. Taylor's quarterback rating for his career is 91.2. A lot of people don't realize that, but that's almost right there with Matt Ryan and Ben Roethlisberger. Their quarterback ratings for the career is not much different and others. Now you compare that to Kizer's quarterback rating last year. His quarterback rating was 60.5. He was brutal. He had 11 touchdown passes to 22 interceptions. He was just bad. I can't say it enough. Now you look at last year, Cleveland was last in the league in points scored per game at 14.6. They were near the bottom in 3-and-outs. They were just bad. They didn't move the ball. Drives were stalling all the time. Now, if you look at this year, Hugh Jackson, the coach, has said he expects a big jump from his second-year tight end, David Njoku. This is what he said there. He goes on to say that last year he split time with Seth DeVal, playing 48% of the snaps. He's going to have a major role this year. The one concern that we have for him is going back to what you said is they got Josh Gordon, Jarvis Landry, Antonio Callaway. You look at Duke Johnson there. So those targets are going to get spread around quite a bit. But we do expect he's going to get a lot of red zone looks because his big physical body tight ends tend to thrive in that. It reminds me a lot of, like I said, Antonio Gates in that regard. Now, coming out of the combine, just talking about how talented this guy is, it said this about him. Now, he was just 20 years old when the Browns traded 2 picks to move back into the first round to select him. So they were huge on this guy. Words that they used to describe him, a lot of the scouts said freak was one word that they used, and they mean that in the most positive way as you could.
That's the way they use it when they call you a freak.
Thank you. That's twice he's been. I mean, notice I haven't said anything negative about him. I'll just bite my tongue. So he was called a freak. One scout said that our tight end coach has said he's the most upside he's ever seen at tight end. There's another guy out there that called him the most refined route runner already. He sees improvement in his ability to focus on finding and catching the ball instead of focusing on what's around him. He's made huge strides in his second year in the offseason. We're seeing that already. He's very similar. He shows a talent level of a young wide receiver, which bodes well that they're calling a tight end with receiver-type talent. That's huge. The former first-round pick is one of the youngest tight ends out there at 21. He'll be 22 during the season, but just so young, you forget that this guy's got a lot of learning. He came out of college early. Of all the tight ends out there, he might have the highest end. The one thing we did say in a previous video, and I will say about David Njoku this year, is I expect that he's going to have success. I think he's going to double statistics. I'm looking at a year of about 45 catches, 650 yards, and 6 TDs, which is about double what he did last year. But I think he's about a year away from truly becoming a possible all-pro tight end. But I do see an increase. I think that's going to help quite a bit. That's kind of my take on David Njoku this year.
Yeah, no complaints about that. I think you're right on. I think he's certainly going to improve, but definitely I completely couldn't agree more with the fact that it's probably one more year away until he's up there in that sort of elite status of super talented tight ends. But we'll talk about a guy. My next guy is not a year away from being a super talented tight end.
Yeah, let's get to this guy. I love this guy, by the way.
Of course, you probably figured when I mentioned that who I was talking about. It's Evan Engram. He had such an unbelievable rookie season, maybe the best rookie season by a tight end ever. Last year, he had 64 catches on 115 targets, 722 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. What a phenomenal year. Now, I'll say this right now. I'm just going to stop early and say I think he's going to be a success. He's going to have a good year. I don't think his year is going to be any better than his rookie year statistically because of the weapons on that team, but he's still a success. Again, just because a guy doesn't take a step forward doesn't mean he's a failure. It just means he was good last
Well,
year
we're
as
giving
well.
two options in this. It's either you slump or you succeed, and he's definitely not going to slump, is what you're saying.
Exactly. The whole binary bad or good, it's just difficult with this situation. But because of Sterling Shepard and Odell Beckham and Saquon Barkley, yeah, I think that he's limited. I think it may be a while till he can take a step forward in his stats, maybe even past 1,000 yards or increases receptions or touchdowns or whatever it might be. But here's something insane to look at. Last year he had 722 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. Only 3 rookie tight ends have ever passed 500 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns their rookie season. Engram was one of them. The other 2, one was Aaron Hernandez and the other was Rob Gronkowski. Of course, we don't know what happened in Aaron Hernandez's career, but Rob Gronkowski is absolutely phenomenal. As you talked about, watch our tight end ranking video. We just talked about how head and shoulders Rob Gronkowski is above any other tight end. Of course, he has injury concerns, but other than that, how much better he is, how great he's been throughout his career. Being compared to Rob Gronkowski is probably the best comparison that we could be making for Evan Engram. Of course, he doesn't play in the same style as Gronk, but he has very similar stats and is just as talented. On top of that, he set the rookie tight end record with 115 targets for a tight end, previously held by John Carlson with only 77. That's an unbelievable, just shattered that record, and that's huge. I think there's a bit of concern because there are so many weapons there that he might not be that good. I certainly think he'll take a drop-off in targets. However, a drop-off from 115 targets to 100 is not bad, however. So again, I don't think he's going to burst onto the scene to be even better and even more unbelievable, but he's going to do something similar to what he did last year, maybe even a little bit better in the yards category, but definitely a success for me, hands down. That was an easy one to do.
Yeah, this guy has all the talent in the world. This guy's going to be, I think, pretty all-pro for years to come. You look at Mark Bavaro, which is a former really good tight end for the Giants, who watched him last year in the preseason and said, this guy can do it all. He can run, he can catch the ball, he's athletic, he looks amazing. And so there were just so many glowing reviews that came out of him. Then he goes in the regular season, and you know what, he really shows this guy can produce. So I'm pretty excited. If you're in a dynasty league and you have this guy, you got to feel really good about the tight end you're going to have for many, many years. So.
Well, I remember we talked about him last year before the season started, and we agreed, yeah, he's going to have a good year. And you were like, no, he's going to have a really good year. And I thought he was going to have a good year for a tight end, but that far surpassed what I expected. And I have to give you credit because you had a better idea of how good of a year he was going to have. I thought he was going to be a good tight end, but he was great.
So, all right. Well, we probably have nothing more to add at this point. These are our sophomore slump for success video. We're going to do a part 2 because there's so many guys to talk about last year that came out. We're pretty excited. Once again, we love your likes, your comments. Get your friends subscribe. There's so many things out there. Help us to build a platform and build this community. We're getting so excited. Football is right around the corner. Thank you for watching our video. God bless and take care.